One man. Goodbye. Hello, Heisman.
20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 45. There goes Davis. Oh, my God. Davis is going to run it all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game.
They give it back now to the 30. They're down to the 20. All the band is out on the field. He's going to go into the end zone.
Four-man Alabama rush. Got him. Oh, no, they didn't. Oh, my gracious.
Yep.
How about that?
Is Deion Sanders going to be successful at Colorado? And more importantly, how can he be successful at Colorado? Garrett, that's the question that we want to talk about here today on the 3 Tech Pod. If you're watching this, you're watching it on YouTube, welcome along. Glad to have you with us for some of this more shorter form content that we'll be doing throughout the off season. And Garrett, when I sat down to kind of plot this out, there's so many factors at play. There's the transfer portal, there's high school recruiting, there's all this talk that Deion does in the media, and there are kind of two camps. One that think he's going to, go win a Pac-12 championship game in year one. I think that crowd is a little crazy. There's also the crowd that says that Colorado doesn't make a bowl game in year one. And with that, they kind of imply that Deion, his coaching style, and this roster are overrated. So when you kind of survey Deion in Colorado and just the circus that has been the last 2 months as he's left Jackson State and now gone to Boulder, what do you make of it? I mean, where is the best place to start when evaluating a program like this, where you're making headlines every 30 seconds?
Circus is probably the perfect way to describe this. Deion, he comes with all the pomp and circumstance. I even think back to the video where he comes in and says, "Yeah, if you suck, hit the portal." Basically, like I think, it's interesting because I think that his leadership style is very much like do what I do and this is my way, and I kind of have skins on the wall, and I think that translates to a lot of people because he's got the credentials, he's got the bona fides, so to speak, when it comes to, just the way that he's played his career, everything else. He can walk into, Travis Hunter, he can walk into Kermani McLean's house and say, "You want to play like me? I can tell you exactly how to do that." And I think that's why you've seen some of the immediate success, at least within, some of the big time recruits and things like that. But in terms of, Colorado and what success looks like there, I think you kind of have to split it into two different camps. You have to split it into just next year, and you have to split it into, where are they going as a program, right? Because I think there's some expectation that they should make a bigger splash in year one just to kind of authenticate, so to speak, what he's doing. But also, long term, you're competing in a Pac-12 that is going to be losing two of its main members. So there's maybe a little bit of a power vacuum there, but you're also talking about programs like, Utah and Washington and, even Oregon State, who have put up some good numbers in recent years and seem to be getting things moving in the right direction. Not to mention programs like Arizona State, which are making a little bit of a splash in the offseason as well. So, you have to think long term, what does it actually look like for them to succeed in the Pac-12 minus, the LA teams?
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think there is certainly a vision for what this Colorado team can be in the new look Pac-12. You talk about USC and UCLA leaving. Technically, we don't know if UCLA is going to get the green light from their board of regents quite yet. But for all intents and purposes, I think there's certainly a role for them, especially considering the Arizona schools are not exactly lighting the world on fire. No. Washington State seems to have taken a large step back. But in the short term, and let's start there, in the short term, here's their schedule next year. They're at TCU, home against Nebraska, Colorado State, at Oregon, home against USC, at Arizona State, home against Stanford. They have a bye week, then it's at UCLA, home for Oregon State and Arizona, at Washington State, and at Utah. I look at this schedule and Nebraska, who I just talked about in the 5-year plan over on our Instagram at 3Tech Pod, I don't think that 2023 is their year. There's a lot of sizzle and media hype around what the Big Red Machine is doing with Matt Rule there, but I think 2024 is more the benchmark for that program. I think Colorado's in the same vein because even though they've gotten all this skill talent, right? And people are already listing Shador as one of the top Heisman contenders going into next season. Um, you get Cormani McClain and Travis Hunter Jr. at the cornerback position. That's still a lot that has to go right for you to even get close to making a bowl. So when I criticize the crowd that says, "Oh, they're going to go 4-8 and it's going to expose Deion," for me, I can agree that 4-8 is a reality. I mean, look, they only won one game this year. A lot of that talent on the roster has hit the portal, and they're installing an entirely new system on both sides of the ball, right? I mean, there's just so many moving parts and pieces. But I want to know, with the high school recruiting, with the transfer portal rankings, and just the pull that Dion has, how soon do you think Colorado can make a bowl game and start to really be on the road to what the national landscape would call success?
I'm not gonna lie. I think a bowl game is on the table this year. I think it's extremely possible that this year they can make a bowl. Now, I think that would mean something like 6-6, and not something like 10-2. Right? I'm not saying that they're going to be out here, competing at the top of the Pac-12 in year one. I
Mhm.
think that you're still going to have to see a lot of what that program looks like. I'm really curious about spring ball and seeing how everything comes together. And also, just to be clear, I think the Shadur for Heisman conversation is a little ridiculous.
That needs to
I I haven't seen a whole lot from him that would suggest to me that he is anything more than just an average college quarterback right now. That's nothing to be ashamed of. Most people don't ever get to be an average college quarterback. So
right.
I don't think he belongs in the Heisman conversation. I'll tell you what, though, they got a real chance to make a statement right off the bat with the schedule. Thinking about at TCU, that TCU team lost a whole lot from this national championship run, and I still respect what they're doing. I'm not necessarily picking them to lose that game, but you got a lot of new pieces to break in week one if you're TCU, and you could be talking about a Colorado team with nothing on tape,
Mhm.
two all-star, all-world cornerbacks who will make it difficult to throw the football. You do a couple things right, you might just mess around and win that game in Fort Worth. So, I think if you start strong, you start with, maybe a win over TCU, maybe a win over Nebraska, you could get a little bit of momentum at the beginning of the year to try to maybe get your guys to buy in, get your guys to, think maybe long term, hey, I think I could play here for the next couple of years, and you start to get transfers and some of those guys' attention as well to kind of build the program. I think that goes more for the long term plan, but just in terms of year one, I think that they have the ability to sneak up and steal some games. But man, it is a tough kind of middle there. When we were talking about danger zones for our previews this last offseason, I mean, your danger zone, if you're them, is probably going to be weeks 4 and 5. Looking at Oregon and USC, that
Mhm.
is a brutal couple of games back to back. I don't care where you're playing them. It is a tough couple of games, and so it's hard to see the schedule getting off the ground too much. But there are some games there in the middle, like you were saying, with Arizona State, Stanford. You get a bye week, UCLA, Oregon State. There's some games to be had in the middle there, depending on how well I think, especially this defense can come together. I don't know that they'll have the talent to be prolific on offense to start, but I think they can play really well on defense, especially considering the Pac-12 is a more pass happy league. You get a couple of lockdown corners, however young they are, that could really go a long way in freeing up pieces schematically for the rest of the defense.
Well, and it's to be expected. A lot of secondary members did transfer over, whether it be from Jackson State or a guy like Kendrick Breedlove, who just transferred over from Ole Miss. He's also a cornerback. They're going to have secondary depth. For me, the concern is up front. I
Yeah.
don't care how flashy you are, how skilled you are. College football is won in the trenches, and that's certainly the one thing that I'm most concerned about. That offensive and defensive line were pitiful, really, for the last several years. And they've got a couple of guys who have transferred in. Plenty of edge rushers want to come in. Taylor Upshaw comes over from Michigan. But I worry about the interior of that line, especially as you start to play teams like USC, like Utah, who's obviously in the season finale, that want to run the ball right up the middle at you. And I don't know that they're going to be able to stop that on a week in, week out basis. Now, could I be absolutely wrong? Sure. Yeah, you could see this Colorado team surprise you, but I think overall, I think it's going to be a good start in year one. You've got momentum, really, no matter how the season goes, as long as it doesn't go just horribly wrong and you win only 2 or 3 games. I think you're still going to see a lot of traction to Colorado. And look, Deion selling that program before ever playing a down of football there, right? I mean, he got
Yeah.
Cormani McClain, who'd been committed to Miami for months, a Lakeland, Florida kid, to flip and go to Boulder, Colorado after a visit where it was literally snowing while he was up there, right? I mean, he's getting kids out of their comfort zones to do things that they would literally never do probably for any other coach that's currently established. There just is a prime time factor. I do wonder how much that shine kind of wears off when and if they get punched in the mouth by a team like Oregon or USC or heck, even TCU right off the bat. I mean, you talk about the corners, you're going to have to cover guys like JoJo Earl.
Yeah.
Game one, right? I mean, Travis Hunter is an incredibly talented dude. It's tough really to judge him watching him play against much, much lower competition, right? Like, let's
Right.
see him go against these 5 stars. And then, I feel like that's when I can be more comfortable about casting judgment one way or the other on it. Just
Well,
like
and,
with Shador.
and to your point, I mean, he's had a year in college, but it wasn't against top tier competition, which, it's to be seen how that affects people, right? You can kind of give, a freshman corner a little bit of a break at the start because you say, okay, well, you were just in high school. Sometimes these kids graduate early, so you're still kind of young and, you didn't quite get to that point yet, but they get, their experience as they go through the first couple games. You'd almost have to treat this like a freshman year for Travis Hunter in terms of playing, really competitive D1 football. And just like you were saying, they could very easily, just like I said, if they capture a little bit of momentum, they could ride that. They could very easily get punched in the face and, their coaching staff could be exposed pretty quickly. Because TCU, not a gimme, right? I think I'd still pick TCU in that game. Nebraska, yes, it's at Colorado, but I mean, Nebraska's still a pretty good team with, Matt Rule and what he's doing. They could come out there and, make that a little bit of a statement as well. Hard to think that game won't be on TV. Yeah, you got Colorado State, probably end up winning that one, but Oregon, USC, a couple of teams, like you were saying, physical teams. People forget USC's offensive line was like right at the end of the season considered one of the best. And I think that they absolutely earned that. They had the game where their starter went down. I think it was UCLA. Their starter went down at running back and the backup put up, some kind of crazy number as well for his rushing totals just because, yeah, their offensive line is pretty legit. They can move bodies up there. So you get anything close to that production this year, you're probably looking at another repeat of some physicality there. And if they're not ready for that, like you were saying, up front on the trenches, they're going to have a tough time, right? Who cares if you can't throw the ball on the outsides? Just keep it between the tackles, right? Just change your game plan, right? Run the ball straight up the middle. You're thinking of a team like Oregon with Bo Nix, a veteran, a quarterback who kind of revived his career. This thing could start 1-4 for you real quick. And when you start 1-4, what that does is it kind of takes the message out of the coach's mouth. And you typically have to have a real veteran, calm presence in the locker room if you're going to get over a rough start like that, or if it's at the beginning of a rebuild. You have to have a guy that's either got skins on the wall so you believe him, or a guy who he's a calm presence. He's going to keep the locker room in one place. He's not trying to play the motivation game. He's not trying to play the let's get hype game. That's not Deion. That's just not who he is. He doesn't have the coaching skins on the wall yet to prove that he can do this at a high level. So you start 1-4 maybe. This could turn into guys wanting to transfer out midseason. We've seen the last couple of years guys quitting on the team at lots of different locations because we know they're about to hit the transfer portal when it opens up. And so, I mean, you could see that situation. Obviously, not hoping for that situation, but that is how it could go sour real quick in year one.
What do you think is more likely in year one and setting the stage for year two? It's not fair to judge any first year head coach really off of the struggles of a program in year one. It's not fully his yet, but what do you think is more likely in year one heading into year two? There's more stake or there's more sizzle and a come to Jesus moment at some point for Deion and company?
Deion's all sizzle. I'm not going to even pretend. Let's not try to overthink that one. Deion is sizzle, and also the problem here is Colorado doesn't have a historically strong program if you look in the last 20 to 30 years, right? And I know that they had some success there in the mid 90s, and they certainly had their success, but looking at the last 10 years, you were talking about 4-8 being a they might go 4-8. I'm like 4-8 might be a dang good year for Colorado, because I'm looking at the last couple seasons, I'm seeing a lot of 4s and 3s and 5s in the win column. So 4-8 might be a nice return to normalcy for them. And just kind of be a good year for what they are typically used to. But you have to admit, 4-8 is not an impressive record, and that's not really something that you can sell to guys if you're Deion in the offseason, right? I think for him, if there's not anything substantial, if you're not showing tangible improvements, right? Even if you're losing your games, don't get blown out. Be competitive. Keep it within 10 points, something like that. If you're not doing that, and I do think this is an unfortunate situation where Deion needs a signature win. He's probably going to have to jump up and get somebody who they don't deserve to beat in order to have a lot of credibility going into year two. Because, without that, he doesn't have anything to sell. He can sell you on, he can develop a corner. But outside of that, I mean, what is he selling you on? A lot of his pitch at Jackson State had to do with the fact that it was an HBCU. Well, you're not selling that at Colorado, right? You can't sell them on easy path to a championship at Colorado. There's plenty of teams above them in the Pac-12. You can't really sell them on, all the nice things of a massive city. Yeah, you can get, kind of the mountain town. I know that is a big draw for some people, but, like you were saying with some of these Florida kids, that's out of their element. So, Florida kids, Georgia kids, a lot of that talent down there in the Southeast, you're going to want to recruit that pretty heavily. And you're probably going to have a hard time getting them to move halfway across the country to some mountains where it's going to be cold all the time to never play in front of mom and dad. That's a tough situation to get anybody to sign up for if you're not showing them tangible results in year one. So I think that he really needs a signature win year one in order to be successful.
It's going to be interesting, no doubt. Deion has not faced a whole lot of adversity in his coaching career. He certainly will. In the Pac-12, who we talked about on a past episode, we think the Pac-12 is actually on the rise, surprisingly enough. Certainly seems like the ACC has kind of gone down to the worst overall competitive conference, and the Pac-12 surprised us in 2022. Yeah, I think it's going to be a bumpy road for the Buffs, but I'm willing to watch and wait and learn in year one and reserve judgment as opposed to trying to make a Twitter headline in week two if the Buffs start 0-2 and lose to Nebraska, right? I want to see a full body of work. I want to see a full conference schedule. And honestly, I want to see a full year of Shedeur at quarterback, right? I do not buy into the hype right now. Think you're wasting your money if you're throwing coins on him to be the Heisman winner. But I do think that it's impossible to say with any certainty, one way or the other, that they will succeed or that they won't. So ultimately, I think it's a waiting game, and it's one that we can't wait to play in 2023. Of course, keep it locked here for a bunch of off-season content. You can find us on our main channel as well, the podcast, The 3 Technique, at 3TechPod on Instagram and Twitter. If you are new to this, if you found us through this episode title, even, welcome, and we'd love to have you on our weekly episodes. They go live every single Monday morning, in the off-season bonus episodes sprinkled through as well. For Garrett Turney, I'm Mitch Mason. Until next time, so long, everyone.
Gracious him. Power.